Now, I had read a paper by an astronomer who was working in Australia. I've got the paper in the front room. I don't know how you pronounce his name. It probably Vauquelin,
Yeah.
who was working at Siding Spring Mountain at that time, and he wrote a paper on novae.
Yeah.
And for the first time, I realised there were sorts of novae, not just one sort, but you could identify by the speed of failure whether they were fast novae, slow novae, medium, and so on. And having looked at the paper, that was the paper that started me off. I read that paper and I realised that here was a chance. So although for the next 6 years I was learning the sky off as a very slow developer, as you can see, learning the sky off sufficiently well down to about magnitude 7.
How do you do this, George? Is it a photographic memory you've got, or is it just...
Well, I don't know whether it is or not. I think it's just trained to do it, and you don't try and do too much at once. You must keep going over and over the same field so it comes into your memory. So that now I have no difficulty in going around the whole...
Well, most people find it incredible that somebody could remember all these star patterns and see a new star.
I suppose so, but then you see, I've been a long time on the job, haven't I? I mean, it was 12 years before I found anything.
Yeah.
And then I think the most satisfactory thing in all my observing career was that all the novae that I found would never be able to be seen with the naked eye in this country, were never found. So that really made the use of binoculars really essential.
It was binoculars that were really became your main...
Yes, because you see, Denning found his nova in 1920 by the naked eye. Prentice found it in 1934. That's 14 years without another nova. The next nova was found in Puppis and was seen by a fisherman on the North Welsh coast, and they tried to get him down to the meeting, but they got him down there, but he backed out at the last minute, wouldn't speak. But that was right on the horizon, you see, right down in Nova Puppis. Well, then the next nova was by night, which is a recurrent nova, Corona Borealis, R.
Yeah.
And then, you see, there was only
Big
4 or
gaps.
5 nova with the naked eye.
Yeah.
So, and I thought, well, surely if you learn the sky lower down, fainter, because the number of stars is greater, that you will have a chance of finding nova. Well, then the light curve of the Nova Lacerta 1950 appeared in one of the journals, which was a most erratic light curve, and I thought, well, surely I could. You see, that started me off. Now that was 1950. Its maximum was magnitude 5.
Yeah.
So I thought, right, there must be a chance of. So that's what started me off. His paper, then the chance that they were so far apart, the nova with the naked eye, then finally seeing in print a nova that didn't reach naked eye magnitude. I thought, right, so.
But it was a comet you discovered first.
The comet was found first after 5 years searching for a comet, and I just got these 25 times 105 binocular telescope with great difficulty. Several were advertised in the journals, but of course they were always sold before they got into print, you see. So the last one I nearly got was the people on the Scilly Islands, that got the coast guards on the Scilly Islands wanted to get rid of theirs. Well, of course, it was 3 months before it appeared in the journal. And I knew somebody in Peterborough who's got relatives on the Scilly Islands and said, well, why didn't you tell us? But of course I didn't know, you see. So once I got those, and I got those in April. Of course, I wasn't able to do very much during the summer season, but then I started in August, and then I got two comets.
And what was your plan for sweeping for comets? Did you start close to the horizon, or did you start further up? And
I just started in the western sky, by a concrete piece at the bottom of the garden was where I first started. I put that bit of concrete down, and then I started to sweep in the western sky, and I found the first comet in Hercules at this time of year. See, so, and I thought, well, there isn't. There's, of course, the Northern Star Atlas, the only atlas I got, was useless.
Yeah.
So I had been to Cambridge, to Heffer's at Cambridge, the bookshop there, and I'd seen that atlas by the Czech astronomers.
Yeah.
And I went, the next day after the discovery, I went down to Heffer's and managed to get this atlas.
This is Atlas Eclipticalis.
Yes, I managed to get that atlas and brought it back, and of course looked at it immediately before it got dark.
Yeah.
And of course I knew there wasn't a comet there, and it had moved about a degree, so I knew.
So really there was a day of
yes.
uncertainty before
Yes,
you knew
exactly.
in your mind it
Oh
was a
yes,
comet.
yes. Well, there was a day that I was certain it was a comet, but you see, you've got to be proof.
Absolutely.
It's no good you reporting something and then find out it's useless.
Yeah.
So I knew perfectly well, and I knew this Eclipticalis was in this shop at Cambridge,
Yeah.
fortunately, and I went and got it.
Yeah.
So the next night, fortunately we had 2 clear nights in a row, which is extremely rare, at least I think it is, and I was able to check it and find it. Actually, I looked at that area because I was looking not for that, I was looking for Comet Giacobini, which is in the same area, in the same area then.
Right.
I was looking for that, didn't see that, but saw this,
Right.
and so I got the new one.
And how did you feel when you
Well, of course I was
realised
quite, I was quite delighted. But of course, then the next morning when I spent the whole night observing in this part of the sky,
Yeah.
and I bet just after midnight I got an object that looked like a comet in Gemini, and I went back into it and looking through Eclipticalis, I couldn't find that on the chart either, but I couldn't find it in the sky. I spent a good hour looking for that object again and couldn't find it. And then as the dawn broke, right low down in the east, I picked up this second comet, which was a very nice comet indeed. But it surprised everybody in the fact that when it went around the sun, it never appeared on the other side, it just disappeared. It never survived the passage of close approach to the sun.
Yeah.
I think it got to within 12 million miles of the sun, and that finished it off, but it was a most unfortunate it did.
So after 6 years of search, 12 years of
Yes.
searching, you found 2 very quickly.
Yes,
together.
that's right, at the end of August. Yes,
Marvellous.
yes. And of course it caused a bit of excitement among Candy
Yeah.
and Marsden,
Yeah.
and they came up almost within a couple of days they called here.
These were Marsden and Candy working at Cambridge.
Well, Candy was at Hurstmansue
Hurstmansue,
and Marsden was at Cambridge,
Yeah.
and they both were in contact with one another, so they both came up here.
So who did you make your initial report to, George, when
Candy,
you made it to Candy at Hurstmansue?
yes, yes, because he'd taken over from Dr. Merton,
Yeah.
and Candy was a very good director of the comet section for the next 5 or 6 years.
Mm.
And of course he had all 4 of my comets, and then on the only time that I've ever been ill was Christmas 1961. The only time I was ever been really ill was that Christmas.
Mm.
And he goes and discovers the comet up in the almost overhead, the only one that he found.
Yeah.
And so that was rather annoying again, you see. But as I've said to Martin here, there's absolutely no justice in this game at all.
No.
If you don't do it, somebody will get it.
Yeah.
Somebody will do it if you don't do it. But of course we are beaten always by the weather here. There's no doubt about that. We're absolutely beaten by the weather. Although he and his friend Nick James picked up that nova in. I don't know why I didn't get it, but I can understand that probably it was clouded out here, you see, during that period, although it was quite clear, only 50 miles away.
Yeah.
Having had the example of what used to happen in Prentice's time,
Yeah.
when night after night I spent outside here and then found out it was useless the next night when it was clouded out at Stowmarket. I mean, it didn't matter too much to him because he could take a rest, but I couldn't.
So it seems to me that though, in learning to search, George, you've had an incredible tenacity in holding on to your interest and your concentration.
You see, I've always felt that it's essential to do something that's going to be of any use.
Yeah.
I was never a chap who just looked through a telescope and took photographs, because you get the same photographs year after year of the Andromeda Nebula or the Trifid Nebula or something like. it's only occasionally do you get photographs of these extragalactic nebulae, which are extremely beautiful, but nobody bothers with them now.
So once you'd found these, the two comets close together in time, you then carried on searching?
Yes, I carried on searching, but it was another 4. It wasn't until March 1963 that I found the next one.
Yeah.
See, having missed Candy's discovery at Christmas 1961, and that was only found that night because the local football club, the Peterborough United, had decided to put lights on the field. See, they hadn't had any before that, so they couldn't have any football matches in the evening. And this was one of the first matches that was played in the evening. Well, the glow from the football lights here decided me to not observe in the evening, but to do it in the morning. So I started at 3 o'clock and picked up the comet short time after. We're near our Sydney. So that was the football club really should claim some advantage for that, but of course they've never known. See? And that, of course, was a comet that actually exploded or brightened up very quickly for a short time, and was visible to the naked eye for about 4 days. But nobody tells you this. It's only you find these things. In those days, nobody told the observer anything. I never got to know anything from my discoveries at all. And so when I found eventually found that the 1965 comet was the number 4. And I didn't go to the meetings at the BAA, but I was very interested to see what was said at the next meeting after the discovery, and find out that the meeting was about to close when a question was asked by, I know he was a gentleman who was then doing quite a lot of photographic work on the sun. Baxter asked the question, was it true that George Alcock had found a comet? The reply was yes, and the meeting closed. And I thought, well, after all these years, that's all you've got for it, you see. And I thought, well, then that comet was Rudnicki discovered, which I missed, and that pretty well stopped me comet observing. That pretty well, I thought, well, I actually see a comet with the chances of not finding another one for 3 or 4 years. I mean, I thought, well, there's not much point in me carrying on. I did carry on in a sort of lackadaisical manner, and then started nova sweeping in earnest, you see, because by that time I was beginning to think it was about time I got one, you see. And I got that one in July, and the one in Delphinus, where I'd seen that first comet years and years ago. I got that one in July, and it remained bright. It was oscillating up and down, but it remained visible to the naked eye for several months. Very similar to, not the same sort of nova, but very similar to Nova Hercules, which of course was always the finest nova I've ever seen, because it was so bright. You see, Nova Hercules 1934, which was discovered by Prentice, that was first and second magnitude, and then dropped and then went up again to third and fourth. You know, it was really bright. Whereas this one, of course, brightened up to about magnitude 3 just before Christmas, then began to fade, but then kept oscillating up and down after that. Then I go and get the next nova on Easter Monday morning at 3 o'clock. And nobody, at least I don't feel anybody thinks that was unusual in a country which is clouded out most of the time. But there were 2 novae discovered by an Englishman, visible to the naked eye, a few degrees apart in the eastern sky. I mean, it'll never happen again. I'm sure it'll never happen again. And those, to actually see them with the naked eye, both about magnitude 4.5, and now that, but it wasn't that, it was an Englishman that bothered me. See, Halley was very pleased he was an Englishman, but I've always thought, well, if I've done a little bit for England, I'm an English astronomer, I might have done. But I don't know. I often think I've just wasted my time. I feel sometimes I have, you see. But you see, to get 2 novae visible to the naked eye at the same time in a climate like this, I sent in 600 observations of Nova Delphini, and when the report was published, I better not say it by whom, but we all know, my name was not mentioned on the report. My observations were the others.
Yeah.
They didn't. I wasn't in the I wasn't in the variable star section apparently.
Yeah.
So they just didn't class me in that lot at all. And I thought, well, I don't know, 600 observations, and I'm not even mentioned. I thought, well, I don't know.
To go back to the early discoveries of comets, how much involvement did you have with other members of the BA's comet section other than Marsden and Candy?
I was not in contact with anybody at all, except Merton in the first instance and Candy in the second. Well, I was not in contact with Marsden. Apparently all the observations that were made in this country were sent by Candy to Marsden. I was not in contact with anybody else at all. Nobody at all. No, it wasn't until...
So you more or less worked on your own exclusively then? Since you finished the...
Absolutely, yes.
It's been all...
Yes. Although Roy Panther has copied me in obtaining the same instruments, the same things as I have, he has pretty well tried to do the same as me, and well, he's been very successful in making telescopes, I can say that. But I've never been involved with the optical part at all.
Did you see them as a tool to do a job?
It's just a tool to do the job. Yes, absolutely, nothing else.
Yeah,
nothing else.
Because so many astronomers or amateur astronomers these days seem to be hooked on equipment, don't they? You know,
especially in America, isn't it?
Yeah.
You see these open meetings in America where there's several hundred telescopes on view, and everybody's going around looking at it, and then you wonder what they've done with them, don't you? I mean, Chesterfield had an 18-inch telescope made, didn't they? Chesterfield. The Astronomer Royal went down there and opened the observatory. Nothing's ever been done with it since. Yeah.
So when you've chosen to use a particular pair of binoculars, and you see the ones at the back here, has been your mainstay really, your main observing weapon.
Yeah. Really. Well, I've been very supported by the firm that sold me that pair of binoculars. Ever since then, they used to, for quite a time, if they got a new pair of binoculars, would I look through them and give an opinion on them. So they used to send these binoculars up to me, and I'd make a report and take them back to them, and they were very pleased. So that when another pair of binoculars came up, like the 15 times 8, no, they were the 10 times 80 for a start, would I look through them? And I said yes, and I looked through them and I realised, okay.
Yeah.
So I found Nova Delphini with those, and then he had the 15 times 80 in his possession. So would I have a look through them? So he did, you see. So I got those, and he pretty well hardly charged me a song for anything, you see. He just, because they've got my photograph in the shop, I said, you can do what you like as far as I'm concerned. If it makes any money out of me, you can get on with it, you see. So that's what happened.
So do you actually tailor the binoculars you use for the conditions that you're going to
Yes, absolutely, yes.
So if it's a pretty good night, which one would you use?
Well, I always use the 15 times 80 for a start.
Yeah.
And I've always used that sort of binocular until recently. Now I've got this Russian pair, and I use them for a start.
Yeah.
But having had the experience of missing 2 or 3 novae in the last, so everybody thinks I've gone hibernating since about 1965, since R.S. Ophiuchi. I'm sure everybody thinks that all Alcock's finished. He doesn't do any more observing. So I now use the large power, high power first, and then I go over the whole sky again.
The whole sky?
The whole lot again.
You don't search selected areas, and you do the whole sky?
I want to do, first of all, I try and do the whole sky with the high power. The whole sky. And I don't just do the galactic equator. I don't do that. I do at least 50 degrees on each side of the galactic fields, on each side of the galactic equator. So I've covered an enormous area, though it takes me, now I'm ever so much quicker than I used to be. I said 2 hours and a half on his last, well, if I do, it's an hour and a half now. And then having done that, I have a pause, then pull out the low pair of binoculars and go over the whole thing again, because you have a wide field, and if you missed any gaps with the other one, there's a better chance that you have with a... and then, of course, in the recent thing, I only got a limited time left. 20 minutes to half an hour was my limit. So I couldn't use the high power for then. I had to use the wide angle power to cover a bigger field in quick time.
So you're using the handheld binoculars to do the Nova search?
Yes.
The binocular telescope to do the comet sweep?
Yes, that's right.
So that's what
although now I think I have a very good chance of finding a comet with these 20 times 60 binoculars.
So you have a selection of binoculars to suit every occasion?
Yes, that's right, yes, yes. And a lot of them are used for bird watching and natural history as well, you see, because I'm afraid that this is only part of the gamut that goes on here.
Yes. What about atlases and things, George? Do you take any atlases out in the observatory?
No, never.
You just
it's memory complete.
Memory complete.
If, as occasionally happens, like happened last night, I thought I got a comet, and it proved later on, because it was in the twilight sky, quite a bright twilight, it looked exactly like a comet, right down low in Sagittarius. It wasn't until 20 minutes to half an hour later, when the sky began to get dark, that I realised it was a multiple star system, you see. But if I have the trouble of looking at the atlases for 3 objects in the course of the night, I'm having a poor night if I look for... I'm having a poor night if I look for 3. Occasionally, like after that last night, I never had any more trouble at all last night. I spent another hour and a half. I covered the whole sky, right from Capella in the northeast to Sagittarius and Scorpio in the southwest. I didn't have to check the atlas at all after that.
And you carry on observing through moonlight?
I went right on, I always go right through moonlight, because I feel I'm in competition with these people if it's moonless, you see. So no, we go right through the full moon period.
And does the moon have an effect on the magnitude limit?
It certainly has it has a tremendous effect on the magnitude limit, but it also has an effect on certain coloured stars. They're much brighter or different in brightness than they are.
Contrast.
Yeah, I sometimes have a bit of trouble with them. But in full moon, I think the limit in full moon is about 7.
Yeah.
But of course in a moonless night it's now about 10 and a half, 10. But I don't worry with anything below 9 so far. But since I've used these good binoculars that I've just started with, I'm going down another magnitude. And what I've been, I'm obviously going down another magnitude. And also, you see, I can start. The most amazing thing is, I was amazed that I started to use the original, the 15 times 80, up near Vega now, which is nearly overhead. And I was having great difficulty in seeing a 5th magnitude star. So I thought, well, I'll put these away and see what the others like. Oh, I could see down to 6.5 with them at the same time. So of course, I don't know why, but there we are. See, so I think the 15 times 80 are nearly redundant now.
Right.
Yes.
So which atlases do you prefer to use when you're making your checks? Have you got a variety of atlases that you would?
Well, of course, I use that atlas.
The uranometry, I saw that.
Yeah, before that, but before that,
and Borealis.
No, I don't use them at all now. They're worn out. I've thrown them away. They're burnt. They're burnt up. Absolutely disintegrated then. And now the other atlas, that one that goes down to 7.5.
You've got Sky Atlas 2000.
Yeah, Sky Atlas 2000. That's reaching the stage when that's disintegrated now. There's only a hold a piece of sticky paper to keep that together now.
So how do you manage in the areas of the ecliptic when you've a lot of asteroids, to contend?
Well, you see, there's only 2 or 3 asteroids that are bright enough to bother, so there's no need to add a couple. There's Ceres and Vesta. Vesta, of course, caused me a bit of trouble from time to time, but Ceres I pick up. But I don't know where they are. I never want to know where they are.
Yeah.
So I just picked up Vesta again in Taurus, way out there near 4 or 5, number 4 or 5 Tauri. Of course, Panther couldn't believe that I was picking up an object of 7th magnitude about 30 degrees or 40 degrees away from the galactic field, but I picked that up, you see.
You try not to make a noise about it when you discover an asteroid, do you? Like Vesta?
Nothing now will ever do. Now I ring him.
Yeah.
I ring him straight away, and I shall ring you straight away. You see, but I don't look until I'd lost when I found that Vesta right down in Sagittarius. Again, I had no time. The dawn had already broken. At 3/4 of an hour, it was already getting light. So of course I rang Hurst instantly, and there wasn't any time to argue the toss, was there? You got to either declare it or wait for somebody else to take it. You see, and I thought, well, I'd better do something about it. So I did. I rang him straight away. You see, but unfortunately he didn't check, and I couldn't find my handbook. I hadn't got the handbook anyway. See, so because you've already discovered that things are not in the best of shape in this place. I'm at the moment I'm emptying a lot of stuff out, so I'm in a deplorable state at the moment.
So I know that 1 or 2 asteroids like that one have caused you problems. Have you had any other false alarms which you thought might have been a comet or a nova that didn't turn out to be?
No, I haven't, not really. It's always either been a double star or something like that. No, I haven't had any real problems at all.
So you've never had a situation where you thought you'd found a comet and you were going to check it out later and somebody else got to it before you?
No, I've never had that.
You've always been confident enough to
I'll say, well, that's no good or something like that, you see. Yes, that's right, yes.
What about communications, Georgie? When you've made discoveries in the past, in the 1950s and 60s, how did you communicate the results to other people to make confirmations and for
well, the only person I communicated with was Candy. And Candy being at Hurstminster, he had a chance of getting, in the case of Novi, getting in touch with somebody who could use a spectroscope.
Yeah.
And of course, what surprised him most of all, when I discovered Nova Delphin in 1967, I said, well, you've got to look for white hydrogen lines. Oh, I didn't know you knew that, you see. So, of course, he took the photograph. He took the photograph himself. He said, well, the white hydrogen lines are on. Well, I said, it's an overall right then, isn't it? He said, yes, it is, you see. So there. Yeah. Now, with the comet, with that second comet, which was in the dawn sky, I phoned Hurstminster direct.
Yeah.
And for once, the caretaker had got something. He acted quick and got in touch with the observer on duty, and they were able to take a photograph like you did in the dawn sky, and it was a bright comet, so they were able to confirm that before it got so it's funny, this has happened several times. You see, it just shows you.
So have you found that as we need to change the tape. Okay, fine. Search procedures and the memorising of all these stars that you know. Do you know the whole sky, or have you learned to recognise patterns of stars as individual groups?
Yes, it's patterns, one pattern straight to another pattern and so on. No matter which way I can go up and down and right, left. I never go the same way twice.
Yeah.
And then I decide at the beginning of the night which is the most likely place to find anything, and so I start there. But supposing, for instance, like last night, the moon is coming up near the Pleiades. I did a sweep in Perseus and Andromeda and Cassiopeia first, because before the light got, and then I did quite a bit of comet sweeping with those binoculars in Ursa Major and Boots and places like that, before I went back to the Nova business.
How many stars do you think you...
Oh, I wouldn't know. I've always guessed, but I wouldn't know. If I go down, you can sort of say there are large parts of the sky which I know down to 7.5. Very, very large part of the sky I know down to 7.5. But there are quite areas now which I go down to 8.5, 9. Near the galactic fields, I'll go right down there. But in fact, there's quite a lot of stars in Uranometria, which I have no difficulty in finding at all now.
Yeah. So you can see most of the stars that are on Uranometria, can you?
Yes.
Or below that?
Yes. No, not below that. I've got down to that now. I think that'll be my limit now.
Yeah.
it's remarkable. I'm getting old, you know. I'm getting aged.
Well, can you transfer these memories of star patterns onto paper, George, or are they just locked into your head?
Well, you see, the only time when I have to now use written records is when I do comets.
Yeah.
When I draw the tails of various comets, which to me are quite complex, but it seems to me the photographer only gets the effect of a spring onion.
Yeah.
I don't under that at all. Having been criticised for planetary observations, which I was supposed never be able to see, I'm very doubtful about sending in these observations to you on comet tails. But then Marsden assures me that I can see a different wavelength than most people. He's absolutely certain I can see different wavelengths than most other people. And the fact that I've been able to see recent comets in the western sky with all that light, again amazes me, because we had some small comets in the western sky, didn't we? Yes, so, but it's quite obvious that that 105 times 25 times 105 binocular telescope looks like being made redundant with these and because you
find these much easier.
Oh yes, and you don't have to sweep horizontally or up and down. You see, you have to sweep horizontally or up and down with those, and this you can go in any direction you like. You see,
most of the textbooks that you read from people who say this is how you should search for comets, and you do these horizontal overlapping sweeps.
Well, I
subscribe to that.
It makes me smile sometimes. Yes, it does. Yes, because I've got to. I only use my method. That's all there is about it. Yeah, I have used it until now, but I'm sure there's a chance I might find a comet with those 20 times 60s. I'm sure those are the ones.
Why do you think there's so few people?
That's it.
These binoculars.
These are the latest. They're much lighter. They have a reasonably sized field, and they certainly have a very fine light grasp, which is quite equivalent to those 80mm. They're quite equivalent to those.
Which objects did you discover with these?
With this, I discovered Nova Vulpeculae 1968, Nova Scuti 1970, and Nova Vulpeculae 1976 with these. And also I found comet Iraqi Alcock with these on the landing, sweeping for 3 minutes.
Well, that's going to be a tale on its own, George. We're going to come to that one in a minute. Why do you think that so few people search visually for novae and comets?
Well, first of all, they're not encouraged to do so by the weather in this country, because they know perfectly well they're not going to find something tomorrow. On the other hand, I'm pretty certain that having discovered a nova or a comet, a lot of people start, but after 3 months they've had it. So
you went for 6 years, George, before you found your first one.
That's right.
And when you found 2 in a week, did this spur you on to
Well, of course,
more?
But you see, I knew perfectly well it wasn't going to be. It was going to stroke of luck, you see.
Yeah. So you can't put all your discoveries down to strokes of luck, George, can you?
No, it's persistently observing. I mean, the hours I've spent, I mean, never less than 200 a year. And in the last 2 months, for instance, I've done 60 hours in the last 2 months.
Yeah.
I mean, with nothing to tell for it. I mean,
you think that the pace is too great for other people?
Either they don't think about it, or they think it's too. They can do something much more simple than that. I don't really honestly know. I know that looking back, if I was a sane person, which obviously I'm not, I would think back and I would say, well, I've been stupid. I spent all these years finding 11 objects. On the other hand, you look back and you say to yourself, well, no other individual in this country has found more than one this century.
Yeah.
There have been 4 other individuals that have found things. I mean, there's Denning, there's Prentice, there's Knight, and Panther. those are the 4. Oh, and Candy. There have been 5 objects found in it. Yeah, but it was before. Oh yes, I counted in 1991. Yes, that's 6. But all those are separate individuals.
Yes.
You see.
So you found more than all put together.
Well, I think I ought to. I ought to think I have anyway. If I haven't, yes, yes.
What about the overseas people that you're in contact with? The people.
Mine that was, sir. Yeah.
People like Collins and.
Well, you see, I was a little bit worried about Collins for a time, but apparently, yes, if you put that across there, it would go out where the light is. Because if you get the wasps in a car, they always fly out where the light is. So
what about the other overseas observers that you're in contact with?
Well, Collins certainly was successful when he was nova sweeping visually.
Yeah.
But apparently I understand that he is not doing any more visual work. He's taken over the same as our friend here, Martin. He's doing it photographically. But of course he has the tremendous advantage that he gets so many clear nights in a year.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I wonder that when you have so many clear nights in a year, you get bored with doing the same job over and over again. We never have. If we have a fortnight of clear weather in this country, it's most unusual. It's much more unusual if you get overcast for 3 weeks in a row. But so you don't reach the stage when you're absolutely whacked, you see.
As far as comet discoveries go, then you've always had a great deal of competition from the Japanese, haven't you?
Yes, always. And the Czechs at first, you see. It must have been an absolute shock to the Czechs when I've got those 2 comets in a week, because they were going full out for they had been doing a great deal of work on it. Yes. What I didn't know that was they carried that 105 times binocular, 25 times up the mountain every time they observed. They took it down at night. They left the stand up at the top, but they went up the mountain every night with those binoculars. They didn't leave them on the top. They carried them down, up and down. And I've seen photographs of the track up to the mountain top. It is, but I mean it's ever so steep. It's several miles. I think it's about 5 miles to the bottom of the valley. But I mean they climbed about 3,000 feet with those on their backs. Yes, I mean they had certainly the same enthusiasm that I've ever had. So.
Well, these were people that were being prepared to do it professionally.
Oh yes, I suppose so. I never thought of that. Yes, I suppose so.
How much help have you had from people in this country to help you do your observing, such as the confirmation and checks? People like Walter Pennell, when you first began your searching, was he helpful to you?
Well, just in the fact that when I discovered Nova Scuti, 1970, he took a photograph the next night. And confirmed it, the double star, the next night. So that was but again, you see, I was very fortunate with that too, because I discovered it on one night and was pretty certain, but I got nothing. The only thing I'd got a photograph in sky and telescope of the area between Scutum and Sagittarius, a small photograph, and I looked and I could just see the 7th magnitude star next to the nova, and I could see there was no star next to it. It didn't look double. But I had no confirmation. It wasn't until the next night, again I was lucky, we had 2 clear nights in a row, and I realised it had dropped nearly a magnitude. So I knew it was a nova then. But I didn't tell anybody the first night at all, because we had no system like TA or anything like that at all.
Do you value the system that TA's
Yes.
got now?
Oh, definitely. I think it's wonderful, marvellous. We've had nothing like it before. It must make the other societies look like, well, you can't tell you. Nothing.
Dinosaurs.
Yes, that's right. Oh, it's wonderful. Because, I mean, with you going down to the recent meeting and giving a talk, and Guy Hurst also put in an article in that there was more data, more information about that discovery than all the other 10 discoveries that I'd ever made. In fact, some never saw the light of day in a journal at all. So there we are, see.
You've obviously had some recognition for the work that you've done, because we've got plaques such as the AAVSO Nova Award here for H.R. Delphini and Elderly Bullpeck and B368 Scooty. These are people who've recognised your achievements, and you've got more plaques here and medals than anybody else I've seen, George.
Well, yes, it's been very good, but you see, they've rather taken the interest out of it when nothing's been done in this country about them, you see. So I would much rather forget about the medals and the awards, providing something has been followed up, you see, with them. But when nothing's followed up on them, I mean, that
recognition from your
this of course was rather I don't know whether you ought to report this. Just stop it for a minute, because you'll have to see yourself.
Your most proud plaques that you've been awarded from the Astronomical Society of the Pacific, George?
It certainly is, because it was sponsored by the BAA, and I should have gone to Seattle to collect the plaque, but couldn't go. But eventually the plaque was brought back to this country, and I was given it by the president of the BAA. So that plaque was there.
I see the president at the time was Alton CR.
Yes, and he's been on recently on one of Patrick Moore's programmes, and he's one of those individuals who doesn't believe so much in this red shift business, and I think that red shift business is far too simple. To me it is, anyway. And as for the Big Bang, I'm afraid I'm not very interested in Big Bangs or what do you call it, black holes, because as a optical astronomer, I'm certainly not very interested in black holes. Now these awards here, we've got
the Merlin Medal of the British Astronomical Association, the Goodacre Medal, the Merlin Medal
twice,
again,
that's it,
twice, and this big medal here. Which one's this, George?
That's the Jackson Group Medal of the Royal Astronomical Society.
Royal Astronomical Society.
That's right, yeah.
And we've got here, that's one not done for astronomy, is this one?
Yes, that was for services to astronomy.
This is your...
It's the MBE, yes, it's services to astronomy. I was given that in 1979. I've just found the letter from the Prime Minister to say that he was considering giving me it. So that was in 1979.
It's an absolutely magnificent collection.
Well, it is, yes. I fully appreciate it, but I would more appreciate the fact if there had been more information about the follow-up from the discoveries that were made. And in each case, it was only the TA that produced anything in the... I've got the original journals upstairs, which in each case there's an article about it. So you think that
feedback to observers is all important, especially...
Absolutely. I'm sure no one else would have carried on with it. They would have said, oh, well, that's the end of it. They wouldn't have carried on like me. I'm sure they wouldn't.
Mm-hmm. What about the brightest nova in the 70s and 80s, Nova Cygni in 1975? Where was George Alcock when the Nova Cygni...
George Alcock nearly finished nova sweeping over that one. I observed that night in a perfect sky, also this time of year, almost within a day or two, isn't it, of this time of year. And I observed the whole sky as I could see it, and I returned to Cygnus at about 12:15 and had another look at Cygnus and didn't see anything. The next night I was told that a bright nova had been found, a second magnitude nova had been found in Cygnus. You can just imagine. Here was I looking at stars of 8th and 9th magnitude in that area, and it was only by chance, and as far as I know the only nova that's ever been photographed like that. Right. It was photographed time after time by an American astronomer, and when I finished off that night, he got his first photograph, and it was 8.5 magnitude. Had it not been 8.5 magnitude when I stopped that night, I would have, nova sweeping would have stopped with me then. But just then, another couple of hours, and I would have spotted it. But no, it just happened to be like that.
Marvellous nova. When's the next bright nova going to happen, George? We haven't had a bright nova for some time.
I don't know. They could appear any irregular interval. I mean, just take the Swedish photographer of 1936. He discovered a nova, I believe, in July, and he got another photograph of a second nova in Aquila within 6 weeks of the first one. And that year was a nova year, because Nova Lacertae was discovered, a bright nova in Lacerta. That was the second magnitude. Fast nova, that was the second magnitude. But there was there was a fourth nova found in Sagittarius. That very same, 1936 was the year when not 1960, 1936, when these 4 nova turned up. But when a photographer can find 2 nova in 6 weeks, I'm always at opportunity. It won't be long before I get another one, you see. That's how I feel about it now, you see.
What about people visiting you, George? Other discoverers, George? I mean, have you met other discoverers? Have they come to visit you, or have you been to see other people? I know that Jack Bennett was over in this country. Did you see that?
Jack came here. I went and met him in Luton. He was with Dole. And I was very friendly with Dole. And when I left Luton, not knowing to me, I'd got in my car his red bag, which was the same colour as the carpet in my car, and I didn't notice it till I got home. So I'd got all his latest information in this red bag, so he had to come up to collect it. So he came here, and I took 2 or 3 photographs of him with this telescope in this garden, and that's the reason why Jack Bennett actually came here. Yes, that's right. Otherwise he wouldn't have come.
Which is the best comet you've ever seen, George? There's been
the best comet. There was quite a series of comets. I think there was that one with the hood facing the sun in 1957. Emericos. Yes,
Roland and Mercos together.
Both together. Those were 2 nice comets. Then there was that comet by Rudnicki, which was a beautiful tail. It went down in the western sky, having been found in the east. It went right across the southern sky, had a lovely tail. And then there was the comet of 1963. Had created a lot of fuss because they thought it was going to be brilliant, and actually it was a very nice comet.
This was Komakotech in 73.
That's right, 73, that's right.
Was Bennett in 70?
Yes, Bennett was a beautiful comet, and that was the one comet that my wife could see in bed, because it was in the right direction when I pulled the curtains across and she was able to see it. I think that was a beauty. I missed the best of Comet West, although Panther saw it at its very best. That was a very fine comet. And
Ikea-Seki, did you see Ikea-Seki?
No, we didn't. I missed. That was one of those nights when I didn't observe. It was my wife's birthday when he found it. It was a brilliant night, and I didn't observe that night. And he found it that very night, low in Hydra. It would have been rather difficult here, but he found it. And then, of course, I found a comet a week later. And Secchi apparently contacted Marsden and said he couldn't have found a comet. I didn't see it. He couldn't have found a comet. You see, we heard that. You see, he got to the point where he couldn't believe anybody else could find a comet but him. You see, so there we are. So yes, he got it. Yes. So I did make up for it a bit, and of course we never did see it at its best. Although Candy at that moment was with the Astronomer Royal at Hell 1 in Egypt, and we absolutely saw it at its really best. Yes.
What about Halley? Did you enjoy Halley after?
I didn't enjoy Halley at all. I thought it was pretty hopeless. I did see it, but the weather was appalling. It was. Was it
just what you expected?
Yes, more or less. I did. People, all that hoo-ha that was made over it, when you knew that the comet was going to be nearest the sun and the other side of its orbit, you knew perfectly well it was going to be not being a very good object 70 million miles away. So yes.
You were born just after its last apparition.
Yes, I missed that by a couple of years.
1912 you were born.
Yes, I was born in 1912.
What about the other big comets that are likely to come? What about Swift-Tuttle? Will that make a big entrance?
I don't think any of these other comets are likely to prove any brilliant. We did see 2 comets in the 1950s, which is the same period as, almost the same period as Halley's comet. they're periodic comets of about 60 or 70 years. But they were only small affairs, small affairs. The nicest comets that we've had recently is those by Levi. That was a nice comet because he had so many tails, which you had a sketch of.
He's been quite a discoverer of late, hasn't he, David Levi?
Well, they've suddenly woke up. Got somebody in America that's woke up to the fact, haven't they? They've got all this beautiful weather and they don't do anything with it. I mean, they should get everything they should get easy. Down in Arizona with 300 clear nights, 330 clear nights every year on an average.
So you think you shouldn't get a look in, really?
Oh no, I shouldn't get a look in at all.
Do you think competition in sweeping for Novian comets is a good thing then?
Yes, I do, but I don't think there's much of it going on. No. I don't think there's much of it at all. I think the photographers are doing a lot more than we are. I think nowadays they have a very good... The Japanese under Honda and those people, Honda in particular... Honda in particular did a lot over many years. I never knew he was a hermit till towards the end of his life, but apparently he was one of those who perhaps like me didn't have much to do with the media and all the rest of it, so we could sort of look at ourselves in the same vein. But he found his first comet in 1930, and then you see he went right on until just recently.
Yeah.
When he,
So what do you think about the light pollution that people talk about? Does it affect you badly in terms of your own observing?
Yes, it does. It practically rules out the whole of my northwestern sky, except, as I say, the only thing I can do in that direction, and it's the reason I do it, is that nova I can do even through light pollution. But you can't discover comets through that light pollution because it's ever so bright.
So has the conditions deteriorated rapidly lately?
Well, I was always troubled by illuminated smoke, which no one else knows how bad the smoke was here. I mean, when you look through a telescope at Jupiter, it's split in half with the heat. You saw two Jupiters side by side for a fraction of a second because of the heat from the brick fields. But some of the very best nights when you could see naked eye 7.5 magnitude stars with a naked eye here, you had streams of smoke running right over the sky. I mean, that's always been the problem here. That's what limited comet work here altogether, that did, yes.
What was the best skies in the world that you've seen when you were involved?
Well, yes, North Africa, of course, was brilliant, but I used to look at the sky with the naked eye in North Africa, and I used to say, well, I can see down to such and such a magnitude there. And then I came back here, and this was before we had any lights in Peterborough. Just for a short time, we had very little light. And it was on October the 12th, 1947, October the 12th, 1947. I looked up at the sky that night from here, and the Milky Way was not a haze at all. You could see thousands of individual stars with the eye. You could actually, how the ancients never realised that the Milky Way was made of clouds of stars, I don't know. Because that night I could see down to 8 magnitude here without any trouble at all. And I have, who's the comet chap in North America, Bortle, he was saying how you could see down to such and such a magnitude, 7.2 magnitude down. And also there was another young Englishman who had spent some time at the Pic du Midi, and he could see down to 6.5 at the peak. And I thought, well, I can get lower than that here. So this was before, this was 25 years ago. I drew a field of Pegasus and sent it to Bortle. And he actually had enough decency to write back and said that my faintest star on this thing, I didn't look at any atlas or anything like that. That was deliberate. I mean, I didn't look at atlas. I just drew the scar field, and I could see down to 7.5 magnitude with ease here with my eyesight. I've got one poor eye, but I assure you, this is an extraordinarily good one. Yeah.
Can I borrow that other one, George?
Yes. Yes.
Now I'm going to come up to a bit more up to date now, because I want to ask you about a very peculiar comet, probably the most peculiar comet discovered than the last one, Iraqi Alcock. There was such tales of this one, George, that you discovered this from the landing window as you were passing and just happened to glance out and there it was. Was it quite like that?
It was exactly like that. And I just put my wife to bed because she'd been crippled already for 20 odd years. I just got her to bed about 11 o'clock, and I just took those field glasses across the landing, knelt on a rubber pad and looked through the window. Within 3 minutes I picked up this huge hazy blob. I said, I found a comet. Oh, you couldn't have found a comet. Yeah, no, after all the time I spent looking at a comet, she was quite right to say so, query it. Oh, I said, definitely a comet. I said, there's obviously, see. So I then contacted I contacted Panther, who was very annoyed. He'd been sweeping that night and he was rather tired, which I always am, but that didn't come and didn't bother me at all. And he'd stopped, and he'd only covered an area sky within about 10 degrees of it. So of course when I told him this coming, he went out and it was clear again, and he looked at it and he saw it. Well, he was right annoyed, as you can imagine. But you see, again, I had found this comet. Then there was a hoo-ha.
Yeah.
The Leicester group had picked up something,
a moving object on the
a moving of it on the RS data, and they had phoned Finland.
Yeah.
And I forget the name of the observatory in Finland. It's Uppsala. They phoned Uppsala, and Uppsala, they got something on an earlier photograph, but they hadn't checked it or found or anything. So then Guy Hurst had informed Marsden, and Marsden then contacted Gibson at Palomar, who had been regularly photographing the sky with a Schmidt telescope there. And he hadn't looked at his film either properly, and then found, as you can well imagine, on a large print, it was this huge hazy blob, which was hardly recognisable in this telescope, you see. Well, then immediately the telescope, it was confirmed. The Finnish cable was garbled. Leicester didn't get a proper figure. But then Leicester apparently got in contact with somebody in RAS people in London, and apparently they were in London at the time, and they stood outside the Royal Society building door and more or less claimed that they'd discovered this comet. Nobody bothered it, seen it. So the news went round. I had several phone calls from people in Peterborough that night, because I was away observing bird watching that day. Came back into Peterborough to find out, phone calls were ringing. Did you really discover the comet, or did you just confirm the Leicester? Well, you can imagine what I thought. It had been announced on the television that the people at Leicester had found this comet. They'd already, in the dinner hour, said that I'd found a comet, but this party outside the Royal Society, actually, it gave the impression that they'd claimed the comet. Well, you can imagine that if I'd been at home, which I wasn't, fortunately, I'd have put my foot through the television. I would have done. I was furious about it. See,
it was a tremendous and unusual comet, wasn't it?
Well, it was the closest comet since 1770, for one thing, and it became, as it approached the Earth, it was almost stationary, but then, of course, as it passed us, it shot past at enormous speed. So it went about 60 degrees in 2 days.
You've never seen anything like it?
Well, I hadn't, you see. But it had no tail or anything like that, or if it had, I drew the tail, but it was very, very faint. And Ridpath actually sent me a photograph of it, which I have. And it more or less agreed with what I'd seen, but it didn't show any tails, so I rejected the tails, you see. But it went from Ursa Major right down to, well, it was near the Pricep cluster the last time I saw it, way in the west. And of course, with all the light, I could just see this huge blob, which was about as big as the Pleiades cluster, disappearing below the western horizon, you see. Well, the most interesting thing about that is I heard nothing any more than that. Then I went to the meeting by Eugene Shoemaker a couple of years ago. I decided to go because his talk, The first Royal Astronomical meeting I'd attended since the Astronomer Royal had given a wonderful account of the setup at the Canary Islands.
Yeah.
Gave a complete, about the Isaac Newton telescope and the Herschel telescopes and all of what they were doing. He was a very good lecturer. Is Smith his name is, wasn't it? Yeah. He gave a wonderful lecture, and I attended that meet. I went specially to hear it, and he was first class.